I'm here with Zah Azmi, CEO and founder of Luxland. Welcome.
Thanks for having me, Lewis.
Because our viewers, the most important decision they will probably make in their life is purchasing property.
Mm-hmm.
If you were talking to our audience, what are the top 3 tips you would give them in terms of investing in property?
Okay, so because it is the biggest financial decision of your life, you want to make sure that it's well researched. You've done your homework and you've surrounded yourself with the right experts to help you get to your goals and whatever motivates you to invest in property.
Sure.
One of the biggest key tip would be education. Read as many books as you can.
Yeah.
Go to seminars. There's a lot of free ones out there.
Yeah.
Seek advice from people who have done it before.
Yeah.
All of those things.
Yeah.
Arm yourself with as much knowledge as you can before going out and executing.
Yeah.
And taking that big financial leap.
Yeah.
The second tip would be use the power of leverage.
Yeah.
Where don't pay cash for your property. Go to a bank and see how much money you can borrow. And, see how much they're willing to lend you, and if you can only if you can put 10% down, put 10% down, and because if you get the deal, then it's all about the deal, not about how much money you've put into it. So once you've got your education in place, and then you can use the power of leverage, then your world's your oyster, so you really go far that way. My third tip would be surround yourself with as many experts as you can who have done it before, because that's why reinvent the wheel, right? If I always try and read as many books as I can on people that have done it before and just follow their principles. And they're well educated, they use the power of leverage as well, and they've also got their mentors as well. So finding a mentor is very, very, very important. And if you can't find one for free, then pay for the advice.
Sure. Talking about education and finding a mentor specifically, I notice on your desk is Rich Dad, Poor Dad.
Yeah,
so
classic.
Obviously he's been a mentor to you, and this is the type of education that people can have access to as well in terms of talking about and learning about property. Is that right?
Yeah, so I actually read Rich Dad, Poor Dad when I was 16 years old. So it's 16, 17 years ago now, and it built a very, very good foundation for my investing. And I started investing back in 2008, so it was a long period of time between when I first read the book and actually executed on my first investment. So having the knowledge beforehand was very, very important. I go along the philosophy of a house is only as solid as its foundation, and that is the perfect foundation builder in terms of education and learning about assets and liability and cash flows and all of those things moving forward.
You probably know this better than anyone, but the median house price in Sydney now is $1.5 million. I mean, what advice would you give for first-time home buyers? Would you continue to look in Sydney, or would you get them to look elsewhere?
Well, Sydney's always going to be strong because we are now an international city and we're getting a lot of foreign investment, and people are doing big business here in Sydney now. So it's becoming much like New York, where it's normal to rent. I don't own my own home in Sydney, but I rent, but I invest in other pockets such as the Central Coast and Newcastle. It's much more affordable. There's a lot more room to grow. The returns are a lot better than the 2-3% yields that you get here in Sydney. And it's a great way to build wealth by buying at a medium level rather than at a peak. Buying at 1.15 million, how much more can you make? The margin is not much room left for margin there.
Sure. And what specific areas would you give first-time home buyers to look at?
In terms of suburbs?
In terms of suburbs, in terms of regions. Like, I understand you're from Newcastle yourself.
Yep.
Would you suggest areas?
So I'd suggest areas such as Wickham, Adamstown, Merriweather, which is close to the beach. Anything that's close or in proximity to the CBD, because that's where everything's happening. There's a lot of infrastructure underpinning that whole area, so you can't lose in terms of capital gains. You'll always rent out properties there for good yields because they are in high demand. There's a housing shortage, in Australia right now, and it doesn't matter how much they build in these areas. There's always going to be a high demand, and for the Central Coast and Central Coast markets, I'd recommend places like Gosford, which is close to the train line, which you can go to Newcastle, you can go to Sydney either way, as it's halfway. Narara, Wyoming, which are the suburban areas around the CBD. Anything within 5 to 10k radius, you'll never lose.
Just one final point, just talking about Newcastle. I read yesterday the announcement of Jarrod Mullen, ex-Newcastle Knights player, coming on board as part of the Luxland team. What's the story behind that?
Well, Jarrod's always been into property, and he's obviously made a few mistakes going through football, and he's got to face the music now and figure out what he's going to do for the rest of his life. He's 30 years old, and which is quite young in our industry, but in the football world is pretty much he's done, right? So it's really important that he's set himself up well beforehand, investing in property, and he's had a keen interest in it, and now wants to move into it full time. So, Jarrod wants to try his hand at property development, which is a bit more advanced than the average mum and dad investor. He wants to, really see how far he can start recycling his funds and see how much he can go with it. But at the same time, he's interested in investing in property, educating others how to invest in property, especially former football friends of his. They earn ridiculous amounts of money and don't know what to do with it. So we're keen to educate those who require the education and channel their funds into things that are going to grow their future and help them in the long term.
That's fantastic. Zah Azmi, thanks so much for coming in.
Thank you.